I don't remember the exact moment August entered my life. I only remember that when he left, I realized how deeply I had loved him. There are emotions that don't explode, that aren't noisy. They form quietly, like the way a crack appears on glass. At first so fine that no one notices, but over time, it spreads, taking over every view. August was a crack like that for me.
I'm Jonah.
A sophomore at a large university on the east coast of the US. I study literature not because I'm particularly good with words, but because I always feel like I only truly exist when speaking through sentences. In real life, I'm the type of person who's easily overlooked. Not too standout, not too outgoing. Someone who stands just far enough away that no one asks questions, but not so invisible as to disappear completely. August was different. He appeared in my life as if without any hesitation. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a deep but warm voice, the kind of person who walks into a room and the atmosphere immediately changes. August didn't try to attract attention, he simply had it. We were in the same elective class, cognition and emotion. A large lecture hall with high ceilings and tiered seats. I usually sat near the back, where I could observe everyone without being seen. August sat down next to me in the third week of the semester, a few minutes late. "Sorry?" he whispered, his voice slightly hoarse. "Is this seat taken?" I nodded. He set his backpack down and sat closer than necessary. Our thighs brushed for a moment. I pretended not to notice, but my body didn't know how to pretend. My heart skipped a beat, as if it had just been called out. Throughout that class, I don't remember what the professor said. I only remember how August leaned in to take notes, how he furrowed his brow when thinking, and how he unconsciously bit his lower lip. A small action, but enough to make me turn away because the feeling in my chest became too clear. We didn't talk that day. No exchanging phone numbers. No polites mails. No fateful moment like in the movies. Just two strangers sitting next to each other, sharing a space, breathing the same air, and that was enough to plant something very dangerous in my heart. It wasn't until the next class that August took the initiative. "Jonah, right?" he said, turning to me before the professor arrived. I was surprised he remembered my name. "Yeah, I'm August." He extended his hand. I took it. His hand was warmer than I expected. Firm, steady, a feeling very safe in a way that could easily lead someone astray. "I see you often sit alone," August said, as if it were a harmless observation. "If you don't mind, can we sit together?" I did mind. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted it too much. But I just nodded. "Sure." From that moment, August became a part of my daily routine. Not abruptly, not invasively. Just there, sitting next to me, asking me trivial questions, sending me reading links, inviting me to study groups at the library. We started spending more time together than what was normal, without either of us naming it. At the library, at the campus coffee shop, sometimes just sitting next to each other, each with our own book, but the silence between us wasn't empty. August often talked about everyday things, the California weather, his family, the summers he spent surfing. I listened, and while listening, I began to realize a truth that scared me as much as it thrilled me. I didn't just like being around August. I liked the way he saw me, even though I'd never told him who I was. There are emotions that don't need acknowledgement to exist. And there are relationships that, from the start, take the shape of something unfinished. August, in a very quiet way, was becoming that unfinished thing for me. Later, I realized that the most dangerous relationships always begin with peace. August didn't enter my life with flirtations or ambiguous gestures. He entered with habits. A text asking if I'd had lunch yet. A nod when he saw me from afar. A repeated "sit here." So many times that I no longer remembered the first one. We became a pair, in a very hard-to-define sense. Classmates, friends, or just two people who happened to find each other at the right time, lonely in very different ways. August often waited for me after class. I'd walk out of the lecture hall and see him leaning against the wall, one earbud in, scrolling on his phone. When he saw me, he'd remove the earbud and flash his familiar smile. "Coffee?" he'd ask as if it were obvious. and I never refused. The campus coffee shop was small and noisy, always with a faint scent of slightly burned espresso. We usually sat at the table by the window. August drank lattes, no sugar. I drank Americanos with milk. Those trivial details gradually became things I knew by heart, even though I'd never tried to memorize them. "Jonah," August said during one such time, when snow started falling outside earlier than usual that year, "do you believe people can like someone without a reason?" I froze. My heart, as usual when he asked questions like that, betrayed me first. "I think," I replied, choosing my words carefully, "sometimes reasons are just things we make up to justify emotions." August propped his chin on his hand, looking at me, his gaze deeper than normal. "You talk like characters in novels. I don't know how to talk any other way." He smiled. "I like that. Those 3 words. I like that. Not I like you, but enough to keep me up all night." I started noticing smaller things. The way August unconsciously sat closer when the shop was crowded. The way he placed his hand on the back of my chair when leaning down to say something. The way his voice deepened when he said my name, as if Jonah carried a special weight in his mouth. One time, when we studied at the library until late, I was so tired I slumped over the table. When I woke up, August's jacket was draped over my shoulders. He sat across from me, reading, the light illuminating his familiar profile. "Did I wake you?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No. You sleep like the dead," he chuckled quietly. I couldn't bring myself to. Those 2 words, this time, carried a different meaning. I began to wonder, and fear the question itself, whether August felt what I was feeling. But every time the thought arose, I shut it down. Because if I was wrong, if I misunderstood, I'd lose the one thing that made me feel seen. August had an ex-girlfriend. He mentioned her once, quickly, like an unimportant detail. I didn't ask more. I didn't want to know where I stood on his emotional map. One late October evening, we went to a small department party together. Someone's house off campus. Music not too loud. Dim yellow lights. August had a few beers. I didn't. I always stayed sober around him, as if afraid to miss any version of August. When we stepped outside for air, it was cold. August stood next to me on the porch, our shoulders nearly touching. "Jonah," he called, his voice slightly hoarse from the beer. "Do you ever feel like you're hiding something?" I swallowed hard. "Everyone hides something. But some things," he said slowly, "if hidden too long, turn into pain." I turned to look at him. In the dim light, August's face looked different. More fragile, more real. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied. August smiled faintly. "Maybe it's me." He didn't say more. We went back inside. But from that moment, I knew something had changed. The distance between us was no longer safe. It began to take the shape of something unspoken, and because of that, it was even more dangerous. I loved August in a way no one taught me to love. No plans. No pretextions. And deep down, I started to fear that this story, from the beginning, had the shape of an unfinished emotion. Everything started cracking at the moment I least expected, when I'd grown so used to having August in my life that I stopped wondering if he'd stay. The end of the fall semester always carried its own kind of exhaustion. Assignments piled up, the library packed, everyone moving faster than usual, as if afraid of being left behind. August and I were busier too. Our study sessions thinned out. Texts no longer came at fixed times. I told myself it was normal, that everyone had their own lives, that I had no right to expect more. But emotions don't operate on logic. There were days I didn't see August, and the whole campus suddenly felt off-kilter. I'd sit in class, unconsciously glancing at the empty seat next to me, my heart empty in the same rhythm. One Thursday night, near midnight, August texted me. "You still up?" I replied immediately, "Yes." Took him a few minutes to text back. "I'm outside the dorm. Can I come up?" I sat up straight. My hands trembled slightly as I typed, "Sure." August arrived within 10 minutes. When I opened the door, he stood there in a thin jacket, hair damp from the rain. His eyes were red, unclear if from the cold or something else. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "It's fine," I replied, my voice lower than usual. "Come in." My room was small. A single bed, desk, bookshelf. August stood in the middle, unusually awkward. I closed the door. The sound echoed louder than necessary. He sat on the edge of my bed. I leaned against the desk, unsure what to do with my hands. "What's wrong?" I asked. August bowed his head. "I just fought with someone. I thought you weren't in touch with your ex-girlfriend." I didn't say it was a girlfriend. The air in the room suddenly grew heavy. "Then who?" I asked, though part of me didn't want the answer. August looked up. His gaze wandered, then returned to me. "Someone I've been trying not to think about," he said. "But the more I try, the more I realize I'm lying." My heart pounded so hard I feared he'd hear it. "August, I didn't come here to make things awkward for you," he said quickly. "I just didn't know where else to go." I nodded. "You can stay here." We were silent for a long time. Just the sound of rain outside the window and the uneven breathing of two guys standing too close to an invisible boundary. August stood up. He walked to my bookshelf, running his hand over the novels. "You always hide yourself in these," he said softly. "At least they don't ask me who I have to be," I replied. August turned to look at me. "But do you ever want to be seen?" That question hit the place I'd always avoided. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I just know I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that if I say it..." I looked up at him, for the first time not hiding. "I'll lose you." August was only a step away, close enough for me to smell the rain on his jacket. "Jonah," he said, his voice hoarse. "You don't know how much space you've taken in my head." I don't remember if I stepped forward or if August moved closer. I just know that in that moment, everything else vanished. When he placed his hand on my cheek, I didn't pull away. August's kiss wasn't rushed. It was slow, hesitant, as if he were asking a question only my lips could answer. I responded. My heart shattered in my chest in a way that was both painful and beautiful. We pulled apart quickly, like two people who just realized they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. "I'm sorry," August gasped. "I shouldn't have." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't apologize." He looked at me, his eyes full of conflict. "I'm not sure I can give you a clear ending." I smiled sadly. "I've never needed an ending." That night, August didn't stay. He left after the kiss, leaving me alone in the small room, my heart still racing. From that moment, I understood some emotions are too late once named, and some relationships, even starting with truth, can't avoid becoming unfinished. After that night, things didn't return to normal, but they didn't completely collapse either. August didn't disappear. He still texted, still sat next to me in class, still smiled in that familiar way. It's just that between us now there was an extra layer of air, thicker, heavier, and more dangerous. We didn't mention the kiss. Not once. As if we both stayed silent long enough, that moment would dissolve on its own, like a dream too real. But the body doesn't know how to forget. I realized that in every small detail, the way I tensed when August sat close, the way my heart reacted when his knee accidentally brushed mine under the desk, the way I had to clench my fists every time he leaned in to say something near my ear. August changed too. He touched me less, and that made me realize how much he had touched me before. His gaze often lingered on me longer than necessary, then quickly shifted away, as if he were disciplining himself. One late afternoon, after class, I caught August standing alone in the courtyard behind the department. The sky was gray, the wind cold. He was smoking, something I'd never seen before. "I didn't know you smoked," I said. "Only when I don't know what to do with my hands." He smiled faintly. I stood next to him. We didn't look at each other. "You okay?" I asked. August took a long drag. "Do you ever wish you hadn't crossed a certain boundary?" I nodded. "Every day." He stubbed the cigarette on the ground, grinding it with his shoe. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, "but I can't pretend nothing happened." You don't have to decide right now, I said, though inside I was trembling. I'm not forcing you. August turned to look at me. That's what scares me. We stood there for a long time, neither advancing, neither retreating, a fragile balance where one wrong word could shatter everything. Then came the last night of the semester. The university in winter was like a temporarily forgotten city. Hallway lights glowed yellow. Footsteps echoed clearer than usual. I was packing when there was a knock. I knew it was August before opening the door. He stood there, no jacket, the cold making his nose red. I don't want to carry this into the new year, he said bluntly. I need to say it. I stepped aside. Come in. He entered, closing the door. The air between us was tense enough that I could almost hear it hum. I've tried dating others, August said. I've tried going back to what I thought was easier, but I keep seeing you, in every empty space. I swallowed hard. August, I don't know who I am when I'm next to you, he continued, his voice breaking. And that both brings me to life and scares me to death. I stepped closer. I don't need you to be sure. I just need you to be honest. August looked at me like I was the last thing keeping him steady. I want you, he said, but I don't know how much I can give you. I placed my hand on his chest, where his heart was racing. This is enough for tonight. We kissed a second time, this time without hesitation. No questions. Just two guys trying to hold onto their emotions before they faded. August stayed that night, not in a noisy or rushed way. We lay next to each other, not touching much, just enough to feel each other's warmth. When he slept, I watched him for a long time, etching every feature as if afraid everything would vanish by morning. The next morning, August left first. On my desk was a small note. If there were a world where I wasn't afraid, I'd choose you without hesitation. I folded the note and put it in a drawer. Some confessions don't come with promises. And some intimate nights, precisely because of that, can't last. The new semester began as if nothing had happened. Snow melted on the paths, students returned, laughter filling the campus with familiar sounds. The world kept moving, only I felt out of orbit. August returned to school a week later than me. When I saw him for the first time in the new semester, he was standing in front of the department building, backpack over one shoulder, talking to someone. He looked just like before. Maybe that's what made my heart ache. He turned, catching my eye. For a brief moment, his face froze. Then he smiled. Polite smile. Nothing more. Hey, Jonah, he said as I approached. Hey! We stood facing each other, the distance just right for a conversation between acquaintances. No old intimacy. No silences that could be understood without words. How was your winter break? August asked. Fine, he replied. Yours? Fine too. Those two words fell between us, empty to the point of heartbreak. We no longer sat next to each other in class. No one said why, but it happened naturally, like a form of self-protection. I chose my old seat at the back. August sat up front with new friends. I tried not to look up, but sometimes my eyes betrayed me. I started writing more. At night, when the dorm was quiet, I'd open my laptop and type out paragraphs without endings. I wrote about unnamed emotions, about relationships I didn't dare name properly, about a guy who always stood at the threshold of choice but never crossed it. I didn't need to name August. Every word carried his shadow. One afternoon, after work at the library, I got a text from him. The first in weeks. You free to talk? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Yes. We met at the lake on campus. The water was still, reflecting the pale gray sky. August stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, looking more tired than I remembered. I'm not trying to avoid you, he said, no beating around the bush. I just don't know how to be near you without wanting more. I took a deep breath. You don't owe me anything. I know, he nodded, but I still feel guilty. Emotions aren't a debt, I said. They just exist. August looked at the lake. I've thought a lot. About us. About me. And I'm still scared, he admitted. Scared of choosing. scared of naming myself in front of others. I turned to look at him. You don't have to become someone just for me. August smiled sadly. You always make things easier to breathe. Maybe that's why I can't stay. That sentence hurt more than I expected. But strangely, I didn't crumble. I just accepted. August, I said slowly, I've loved you in the way I know how, and I don't regret it. He turned to me, his eyes wet. Me too. We didn't hug, didn't kiss, just stood next to each other, for the last time, in a silence no longer tense. From that day, August gradually withdrew from my life. Not abruptly, not cruelly, just texts that thinned out, encounters where we passed without stopping. I graduated a year later. At the ceremony, among hundreds of faces, I didn't look for August. I didn't need to anymore. But on some nights, long after, when I recall the shape of an emotion that was never completed, I still think of him. Not with sharp pain, but with a strange tenderness. August was my unfinished romance. But he was also the one who taught me that some unfinished emotions aren't lacking anything, they've given us too much. Years later, after leaving that university campus, I still sometimes dream of August. In the dreams, he always appears in familiar places. The third floor of the library, the Winter Lake shore, or the dorm hallway with its pale yellow lights. But there's one thing common in all those dreams. We always stand just far enough to see each other, but never close enough to touch. I wake up with a very faint emptiness, as if I've just dropped something that no longer belongs to me. Life after college swept me along in its own rhythm. I moved to another city, worked for a small publisher. I wrote more, clearer, more honestly. I began allowing myself to name emotions I'd only avoided before. I dated too. There were good, kind men willing to stay. Some held my hand on crowded streets without hesitation. Some asked about the future in a serious tone. I tried moving on, not to forget August, but to not get stuck in the past. And I realized a gentle truth. August wasn't the measure for my later loves. He was just the starting point. One fall afternoon, while sorting old manuscripts, I found that note from years ago. August's handwriting was still there, slightly slanted, the ink a bit faded. If there were a world where I wasn't afraid, I'd choose you without hesitation. I read it slowly. This time, no pain, just a clear sense of gratitude. We often think unfinished romances are failures. But as I grew older, I came to believe that some people enter our lives not to stay, but to teach us to feel deeper, more real, and braver with ourselves. August gave me that. A year later, my first book was published. Not a complete love story, just fragments of memories, emotions without clear endings. At the book launch, someone asked me, "Is the character August real?" I smiled. "Yes. Do you two still keep in touch?" I shook my head. "No. But he's still here." I placed my hand on my chest. That night, I got a strange email. The subject line was just Jonah. I opened it. The sender was August. He wrote that he'd read my book, that he recognized himself in every silence, that it had taken him years to name himself properly, but he'd finally done it, that he was living a normal, stable life, and for the first time didn't feel scared thinking about the past. The email ended with a short sentence. "Thank you for being the place where my emotions were once allowed to exist." I didn't reply right away. I closed the laptop, stood up, opened the window. The night wind rushed in, carrying the scent of a strange city I'd begun to call home. The next morning, I wrote back to August. Not long, not digging up old things. Just a greeting, a well-wish, and a proper goodbye, no pain, no regret. Some loves don't have a complete shape, but because of that, they linger in us for a long time. The shape of that unfinished emotion, named August, stayed with me, not as a wound, but as a vein under the skin, reminding me that I'd once loved, once desired, once dared to open my heart without any guarantees. And that was enough.